Okay, so that's probably all you need to know about ammunition. And so if you've had your fill of talk about ammo, you can skip this chapter and move on to the next one. But that said, this wouldn't be a complete guide, and it wouldn't be the thorough curriculum source that would offer a master's degree level education on the subject if I stopped here, because there's a few other details that you might need to know someday. And so with that said, if you want to learn some more about ammunition, some potentially important things, stick around for the rest of this chapter. It's just going to be another few minutes, and I'm going to dive into some more details. Since the entire point of a firearm is to put a bullet downrange as quickly and accurately as possible in a way that's as safe for the user and as dangerous as dangerous for the target as possible, then we can know that it's not wise to cut corners on or sacrifice on the quality of the ammo that you put in your gun. And so if you're buying practice ammunition, make sure to buy good, high quality, full metal jacket ammunition with shiny brass casings. You can find cartridges with bullets or casings manufactured out of other material, other than brass, or a brass alloy anyway. However, it's almost always only done to save money, okay? Cheaper is cheaper for a reason. So again, your practice ammo should be full metal jackets inside of shiny brass cases. If you're buying ammunition to be used for self-defense, then you really need to look at only two things. The first one is the price, and the second one is the label on the box. Make sure that the ammunition specifically says that it was designed for self-defense. That's very important for reasons that you'll see in just a minute. Now, the other thing is make sure that it costs significantly more than your practice ammo. All right? That's because in America, you usually get what you pay for. And even though evaluating the quality of your self-defense ammo is important, and we're going to get deeper into that in just a moment, you can usually tell just how well made and how reliable that bullet is going to be based on its price. And so what you do is you just look at the cheapest box of self-defense ammo, and then you look at the most expensive and try to buy something that's in that upper range. The most expensive self-defense ammo you can afford. Trust me, your life is worth a few extra pennies. We're going to divide the discussion of a cartridge up into two categories. The bullet itself as one category, and then the cartridge as a whole as the other category of discussion. We judge cartridges as a whole by their reliability in feeding into the firing chamber and in detonating and in being extracted from the firing chamber without issue. The highest quality cartridges will feed, cycle, and operate without issue. When you start trying to save money on cartridges, what happens is you begin running into issues. The ideal situation is to use a cartridge with a soft metallic casing, usually brass colored, a reliable primer made out of non-corrosive materials so that it won't corrode the inside of your barrel at the chemical or at the molecular level, and a reliable propellant, something that's going to go off every time. The casing itself is the most important factor here. You see, while most American-made ammunition utilizes a type of brass alloy, it's possible, as I mentioned a moment ago, to save money during the manufacture of ammunition and use either aluminum or steel material for those casings. Soft brass casings are usually gold colored, while aluminum or steel casings are usually a silvery color. Now, one exception to the rule for avoiding silvery colored ammunition cases is with nickel cases, which are actually higher quality than brass, and therefore they're used in many of the most expensive self-defense cartridge loads that you can purchase, such as with the ammunition that I carry in my pistol. The reason why you want to avoid a heavy metal or a very, very hard metal like steel or even aluminum compared to the brass alloys that are preferred is that these hard metals, they really hit the feeding ramp of your barrel, of your handgun, very hard when they're loaded into the firing chamber. And over the course of hundreds and even thousands of times where a bullet is sliding up that feeding ramp and into the barrel, what happens is it simply becomes a matter of what metal is harder. And when that steel casing is nearly as hard or is as hard as the feeding ramp of the gun, it's going to take a very thin amount of that feeding ramp with it every time. Now, it happens at the molecular level. It's a very small amount, but over the course of 1,000 rounds, you can begin seeing grooves formed. Or somebody with a very specific measuring device could see that that feeding ramp is being worn away. And so what happens, I mean, the reason we want to avoid this is that once that feeding ramp is corrupted in any way, the reliability of that gun's ability to feed ammunition reliably and quickly into the firing chamber can be compromised. So what this all means is that if you use steel case ammo or even enough aluminum ammo, you can eventually start seeing jams in your handgun. And so again, steel casings are cheap, but in the long run, they can hurt your handgun. Now, aluminum is again softer than steel, but it's harder than the brass alloy that you'll see in most places. And so for that reason, and because most indoor ranges don't even let you use aluminum or steel because they're not reloadable and they want to make money off your ejected casings, then I recommend that you stay away from aluminum and steel cased ammunition, even for practice ammo. Now, if you're shooting on your own property and you don't plan on reloading, aluminum cased ammo is fine for most guns, especially a tier 1 combat grade handgun. And the worst case scenario is you can always replace your barrel and replace your feed ramp. But again, I recommend simply playing it safe and going with gold colored brass alloy casings, because when you eventually create or cause malfunctions in your handgun, they're likely to rear their ugly heads at the worst possible time. Now, primers, again, you already know what they are. That's the little thing on the back of a cartridge that, when hit, detonates the rest of the propellant. And so, the only thing you have to know about primers is that in the olden days, there were primers that used a corrosive chemical. And it was cheap to manufacture and it was very effective, but like lead and gasoline, it wasn't a good idea in the long run because it has negative consequences. And one of the bigger ones is it deteriorates the interior of a gun barrel. So when you're dealing with modern ammunition, even if it's steel cased or aluminum cased, you don't have to think about primer. The primer is just going to be good. But you can make sure on the box somewhere that it says non-corrosive primer. This is recent enough history that they still make a point to say that. So just make sure it says non-corrosive primer, okay? Now, this becomes important if you're buying old surplus ammunition. If you're doing that, then make darn sure that it says non-corrosive primer. Because if you're buying old ammo from the 1930s or 40s, you'll be surprised to find how common that is. Then it could have these old corrosive primers. So just make sure that the ammunition box or the label that it's being sold with says non-corrosive primer.